What kind of beings would willingly abandon heaven? Before the world was flooded, before the law was given, before the Tower of Babel scraped the clouds, there was a rebellion, not one of men, but of angels. Celestial beings, radiant and ancient, descended not with trumpets and glory, but in silence, and with desire. They did not fall by force. They fell by choice. It is written in Genesis 6. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, of all whom they chose. At first glance, it reads like a strange and isolated verse, a poetic relic. But when read carefully, it marks the moment heaven bled into earth. The boundary between divine and mortal was broken, and something was born that was never meant to be. These sons of God, according to ancient interpretations, were not men at all. They were watchers, holy angels sent to observe mankind. But they did not merely watch. They desired. They longed, and they took. What followed was more than forbidden union. It was corruption on a cosmic scale. From this union came beings not entirely human, giants of flesh and spirit, the Nephilim. They were heroes to some, monsters to others. Ancient texts describe them as beings of immense size, strength, and violence. They devoured all that the earth provided. Then, when the earth gave no more, they devoured men. But who were these angels? What caused them to fall so catastrophically? The Book of Enoch, an ancient Hebrew text once revered but later hidden, gives them names: Samyaza, Azazel, Ramiel, Arachiel, and many more. 200 descended to the summit of Mount Hermon and swore a pact, an unholy oath, that they would all share in the risk. Together, they crossed a line that heaven had never authorized. And yet their sin wasn't just lust. They didn't only take human wives, they taught forbidden knowledge, things mankind was never meant to know. According to Enoch, they revealed the secrets of heaven, sorcery, enchantments, the art of war, the properties of plants and roots, astrology, the movement of stars. Men learned to forge swords, to kill with purpose, to summon power beyond the natural. Women were taught charms and beautification, turning seduction into craft. The world was altered forever. God saw what had been done. The purity of creation was corrupted. The balance was lost. The thoughts of man were only evil continually. And so judgment came, not only to man, but to the watchers. These angels, once majestic and radiant, were cast down, bound in darkness. Enoch says they were imprisoned in the depths of the earth, under mountains, in abyssal chains, until the day of final judgment. Their children, the Nephilim, were wiped out by a flood, or so it was thought. Yet shadows of them appear again after. The flood in Numbers 13, when Israelite spies speak of giants in the land of Canaan. We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, they say. Could it be that the Nephilim bloodline survived? This is not just a tale of ancient angels and monstrous offspring. It's a warning, a thread woven into the fabric of the Bible and hidden in plain sight. A story so strange, so theologically dangerous, that it was buried by tradition, softened by translators, and removed from the public reading of Scripture. But the story persists, because the Watchers were not just part of history, they were part of the fracture between heaven and earth, between obedience and rebellion, between knowledge that builds and knowledge that destroys. Their legacy may be ancient, but their influence? Perhaps not so distant. What if the greatest advancements in early civilization weren't the result of human brilliance, but angelic rebellion? Long before modern science, long before the printing press, agriculture, or steel, there existed knowledge too advanced, too dangerous, and too precise for primitive mankind to possess on their own. According to the Book of Enoch, that knowledge did not come from man. It came from the Watchers, these fallen angels, after descending to earth, did not simply take wives. They educated humanity, and what they gave us, what they unveiled, altered the trajectory of the world. Azazel taught men how to craft swords, knives, and armor, ushering in the age of war. Men who once defended their families with clubs and stones now wielded blades forged with deadly intent. The art of killing became refined, precise. Strategic dot-arm arrows revealed how to break enchantments and cast them. Barakijol taught astrology, the secret of the stars. Penemu shared the mysteries of writing in ink forever, changing how men preserve knowledge. Kesdea instructed on the cycles of the moon and the biting of serpents. These were not innocent teachings. They were accelerants, weapons, and they burned through mankind's innocence like wildfire. Some teachings might sound harmless today: writing, metalworking, understanding the stars. But in the context of early humanity, when man was still learning how to survive, these gifts were godsends laced with poison. They gave men power before they had wisdom, and power without wisdom becomes corruption. The result? Civilization advanced unnaturally fast. Violence increased. Ritual magic spread. The worship of false gods, rooted in what the Watchers revealed, began to dominate the ancient world. Human beings were no longer children of Eden. They were engineers of destruction, students of fallen angels. And what of the offspring? The Nephilim? These hybrid giants weren't simply tall anomalies. According to Enoch, they were insatiable. They consumed the land's resources, livestock, crops, even humanity itself. They began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, the text says, hinting at forbidden tampering, even unnatural breeding or experimentation. In other words, they corrupted the entire created order. Eventually, the cries of mankind reached heaven. The archangels Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel petitioned God. They looked upon the earth and saw a world teetering on annihilation, not just morally, but biologically, spiritually, cosmically. God responded not with a single act of wrath, but with a plan of purification. He commanded Uriel to warn Noah. He sent Raphael to bind Azazel and cast him into a pit in the desert Dudale, where sharp stones would cover him. He sent Gabriel to destroy the Nephilim by pitting them against each other in a great war. And finally, he ordered Michael to imprison the leaders of the Watchers in deep darkness, where they await judgment. The flood was not merely punishment for human sin. It was a divine quarantine, an act of mercy to prevent the total unraveling of creation. God washed away the contamination dot, and yet hints remain. Why do so many ancient civilizations, Babylonians, Greeks, Egyptians, speak of gods descending from the heavens and teaching man sacred arts? Why do they all speak of demigods, giants, heroes, beings born from divine human union? Why does every continent preserve myths of a great flood that wiped out a corrupt, hybrid world? Because maybe they're remembering the same thing through different languages, symbols, and names. Maybe the story of the Watchers is the original trauma humanity never truly forgot. The church silenced this story over time. It was too controversial, too mystical. But early Christians like Justin Martyr and Irenaeus believed it. So did the authors of Jude and 2 Peter, who refer to angels being bound in darkness, awaiting judgment. The truth was never erased, only hidden dot, and today many wonder, has forbidden knowledge truly disappeared? Or does it still whisper in laboratories, symbols, screens, and stories? The Watchers taught humanity once. What if their legacy continues subtler now, but no less? Dangerous? The greatest deception may not be in the fall, but in forgetting it ever happened. Imagine a prison so deep that no light reaches it. A place where time does not pass as it does for men. A realm beneath the earth where the fallen wait not for redemption, but for final judgment. That is the fate of the watchers. According to the Book of Enoch, after the great corruption they brought upon the earth, after their children, the Nephilim, filled the land with violence and ruined. God pronounced judgment. But it was not immediate destruction. It was containment. The watchers were forced to watch their own children turn on one another in bloodthirsty war. These mighty hybrids, the giants of renown, fell by each other's hands, cursed by divine command. Their spirits, now disembodied, became what later texts would call unclean spirits or demons, doomed to wander the earth without rest. No longer belonging to heaven or to man, they were restless echoes of an unnatural union. And the watchers themselves? Bound in, chains beneath the mountains, cast into the dark pits of the earth, into places with names lost to time only hinted at in ancient maps and obscure scripture. Their leader, Semyaza, once so bold, now silenced in eternal despair. Azazel, buried beneath the desert, his name remembered only in the rituals of Yom Kippur, when a scapegoat was sent into the wilderness, symbolically carrying sin back to the one who first taught rebellion. The Book of Enoch tells us that their judgment was sealed, that they will remain in darkness until the great day of judgment. Jude 1-6 echoes this. And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. But what does this mean for us? If the watchers are bound, if their children are dead, why does their story matter? Because their legacy never truly died. The forbidden knowledge they gave mankind didn't vanish in the flood. Fragments remained. Hidden arts passed down through secret orders. The names of the watchers like Armaros or Barakijal resurfaced in esoteric traditions, magical texts, even ancient grimoires. Civilizations rose from their ruins, carrying strange similarities, pyramids, sky-watching temples, blood rituals, all across continents that supposedly never met. The unclean spirits of their offspring, restless, enraged, are said to have whispered to prophets, possessed the vulnerable, and sowed chaos in the shadows of history. God, in fact, Jesus himself encountered them. The Gospels are filled with stories of demonic possession. When Jesus cast out a legion of spirits from a man, they begged him not to send them into the abyss. What abyss? The same dark realm the watchers were thrown into. The same pit described in Revelation, where the bottomless pit is opened and torment spills forth. The New Testament doesn't ignore the watchers. It assumes you already know them. The watchers' fall was more than a theological footnote. It was the beginning of spiritual warfare, a breach in the order of heaven that humanity has been entangled in ever since. The battle between corruption and restoration, between forbidden knowledge and divine wisdom, between rebellion and obedience. And perhaps that's why this story was buried. Because if it's true, then the world is far stranger than we've been told. Then ancient angels taught war. Then demons are not just vague evil forces, but the tortured remnants of a monstrous generation. Then sin was not just a moral failure, but an ancient inheritance, coded into flesh by a natural union. And then, our future may depend on remembering what happened the last time heaven and earth collided. The watchers are gone, but their warnings remain. Their punishment serves as a divine reminder. No knowledge is worth the soul. No power is worth separation from the Creator. And no rebellion, however glorious it seems, ends in anything but darkness. But within that judgment is also a hidden hope. God did not destroy everything. He preserved Noah. He preserved truth. And he left behind whispers of warning for those willing to listen. So listen closely. The watchers fell, but their echoes still move in shadow. And now that you know their story, what will you do with it?